Hi, this video is going to talk about nested for loops. So, as with conditionals, we often have situations where we need to put loops inside of another loop. So for example, what if we wanted to print out each character of a string 3 times? I would need a for loop that loops 3 times, but then I'd also need a for loop to loop through the length of a word. And so let's trace through this here. So let's just say our word here is hello. And so let's just say that's the value of word. And so the length of word here would be 5. Hello has a length of 5. Range 5 returns 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so these are going to be all the values of I. Then we're also going to look at our values of j. J in range 3. So our range 3 values would be 0, 1, and 2. And so now we're going to trace through this loop. So for I in range length word, so we're going to look at I first. And so our value of I is going to start at 0. Then we are going to jump into j. So right away, as soon as I starts at 0, we go into our j for loop. And so then j is going to start at 0. And then I'm going to print word bracket I. So word bracket I is hello bracket 0, which is h. So first thing that happens is h gets printed. Now I'm going to increment. So now I'm going to be on j is equal to 1. So for j is equal to 1, what am I going to do? I'm printing word bracket I again. So I'm going to print an h. Then my loop continues, and I move on to 2. So now j is 2. I'm going to print word bracket I again, so that's h. Then I exit out of this inner loop because I've gone past 2, right? And there's no value after 2, so I exit out of this loop. I go back up into this top for loop, and now finally my 0, my I equals 0 becomes I equals 1. So now, after the inner loop completely finishes, now the outer loop goes to 1. And so now I'm going to trace again. So now that I is 1, now I'm going to redo this entire loop all over again. So for j in range 3, I'm going to start at 0 again. So what am I going to do? I'm going to print word bracket I. So now in this case, word bracket I is 1. Now I'm going to print e. Then I'm going to do that for 0, 1, and 2. So e, e, and e. Once this inner loop is done again, then I'm going to go back up into my loop that's above it, and now I'm going to increment again by 1. And so now I is going to be 2, j is going to be 0, then j is going to be 1, then j is going to be 2. I'm going to loop through that again, and I'm going to wind up printing L, L, and L. And then I'm just going to keep going in that same manner. So I loop all of the inner loop before then moving to my outer loop. And so that's an example of looping through a word and then looping through, looping some number of times. So let's think about what happens if you switch the two. So if you have for I in range 3 and then for j in range length word. So let's take a look at Replit and see what happens here. So here, if we switch it, so I'm going to just run this, and I'm going to print switched. And let's do hello. So notice for this one, because I flipped the I and the j lines, this is going to print every single letter in word first, because the inner loop executes first. So for j in range length word, print word bracket j, I'm going to print H, print E, print L, print L, print O. I'm printing all the letters in the word before I move back into the I for loop. And so then that repeats it 3 times. So there's a difference when there's a difference in order. One more example is, well, first let's just go through the definition. So a nested loop is a loop within a loop. So it's an inner loop with a body within the body of an outer one. So it's going to first pass through the outer trigger, like the first pass through the outer loop triggers the inner loop, which then executes to completion. So the inner loop finishes before the second iteration of the outer loop. So a good example is using a clock. So for example, if I had this code here, for M in range 10, for S in range 60, what happens here is S is going to increment 60 times before M increments at all. Exactly like a clock. So S starts at 0, goes to 1, goes to 2, goes to 3, goes to 4, minute is still 0, M is still 0, 5, 6, 7, 8, it keeps looping, and it doesn't move out into this outer loop until we get to past 59. And so let's look at that code here. So let me uncomment this out. And if I run this, notice I also imported time, which allows me to leave 1 second between. And so here, if I zoom in, you guys can see 0 minutes, 10 seconds, 11, 12, 13, 14, and it's just going to keep going. And this outer loop here does not increment, so M does not change until I have completed the full loop here. And so yeah. That's all for nested for loops. Now you're going to try some coding bat problems.